If you've just had new struts installed on the front of your Sprinter 3500 van or Class C, you're probably feeling a nice improvement in ride and control. But if you're feeling any kind of looseness in your steering and experiencing any popping or clunking, there could be a major issue with the installation.
Tech Time Tuesday.
Sway and cornering stability is one of the areas where we feel the Sprinter 3500 chassis, especially when it's used in a Class C motorhome such as this Winnebago Navion, really has some room for improvement. And one of the most effective ways of addressing that issue is installing a good set of front struts on the van or motorhome. We really like the Coney manual adjust 87-2657 front struts. There are some other good options out there as well. All that being said, if that installation is not done properly, it can create some very significant issues, potential safety hazards with the installation. So today we're going to be looking at our 21 Mercedes chassis, 22 Winnebago Navion, and talking about some of these issues. So really what we are looking at is two washers here. So I have here basically the front strut assembly stacked up on the Mercedes chassis. So this basically is how it would install. You can actually see in here, you can see that same mount right there that sits on the bottom of the sheet metal, and then you come in from the top inside of the van or coach to access this top of the mount here, the top nut. And we'll get to that a little later in the video, showing you inside the van what that looks like. And what we're really going to talk about today is two washers that, if they're not included, can cause this to fail. So we've got one washer on the top here and one washer on the bottom here that, in order for this mount to hold up properly, really have to be there. Now, why would those washers get left out? Well, let's back up a little bit and talk about what makes the design somewhat unique on the Sprinter compared to some other chassis. So looking at this assembly, you may be noticing something's missing. What is that? Well, a coil spring. So if you are at all familiar with cars, vehicles that use a strut setup, typically you've got a coil-over strut. So what does that mean? You've got a coil that basically sits over the strut assembly, and we've got one here for comparison from a different model of vehicle. So this is a coil-over assembly, and so this is your front spring, and the strut itself, or front shock or damper, it's all one assembly. The Mercedes Sprinter chassis is unique in that it does not use front coil springs. Instead, it uses a transverse leaf spring. So all that strut is doing is just acting as a damper or shock absorber, although it is also acting as basically your anchor point for your suspension. So if that top anchor point were to come loose, you're really losing your steering, either on a coil-over strut or on the Mercedes Sprinter chassis. But so back to this coil-over design. So you'll notice you've got your three studs here that mount that to the vehicle, and then you've got the top nut there that basically holds this top plate and the spring in compression to the strut assembly. And so if you were to change this out in the vehicle, the only way to do it is you've got to take those three nuts loose, take the bottom loose, remove it, and then you either have to replace it as an assembly, which is what would be done in this case, or if you wanted to reuse your spring, you'd have to use a spring compressor, disassemble that from a strut assembly, and all that. But on the Mercedes, again, we don't have a coil spring. We have a transverse leaf that is totally separate from the strut assembly. So it does really simplify the process of swapping out these front struts, because it really makes it easier to remove this strut assembly. So instead of having to remove the mount along with the strut, it's possible to change it out by simply coming inside the vehicle, removing this top nut, remove your washer, and then this stays anchored to the vehicle. And of course you have to take your lower bolts on the knuckle loose, but that can then be removed. And normally this lower washer would be clipped onto this boot. I wasn't able to get it stuck on there, but it actually helps for illustrating purposes that these are two separate pieces. But this lower washer does hold that dust boot on. And when you buy a Coney strut, this is what it's going to look like. So it does not come with a new boot. It does come with a new top nut because the new conies use a different thread pitch, and it's also a self-locking nut. So what this means is there's really two potential points of confusion back to those washers. So we'll talk about that top washer in a second when we get back inside the van. But talking about this bottom washer, some people may think, oh, the only purpose of this lower washer is to hold the dust boot in place. New Coney doesn't come with a dust boot, therefore I leave out the washer and dust boot. That's wrong. Do not do that. The dust boot itself, not very critical. A lot of Coney shocks actually are installed without dust covers where clearance doesn't allow it. So this piece in itself is not super critical, but this washer, highly critical. Getting back to our design here. So if this washer is not in place, you can still install it and it looks okay, but this piston, what can happen if you hit a big bump, something with a lot of load acting upward, it can actually push that sleeve and the whole rubber assembly right out of this mount, and now it's protruding up, it's just flopping around. You've really lost steering control, you've lost your damping, it can definitely cause an issue. So again, if you are replacing your struts, if you're having a shop replace the struts on your Sprinter, they need to be familiar with this. Really, they should be, putting the new boot or reusing the boot. If it's in bad shape, you can order new ones from Mercedes. There's also aftermarket ones available, but most critical thing, that lower washer must be installed. Similarly, this upper washer must be installed. So what can happen if we leave that out? Well, the same thing, just in the other direction. In this case, it's even more potentially hazardous. If I don't have that on, I can put that nut on and tighten it down. It'll tighten down on that metal sleeve there. But if I have some heavy cornering, a lot of downward load acting on this mount, it can pop that rubber right out of this mount. And now I've totally lost my steering. The wheel is free to flop around. Very, very dangerous situation. And now let's take a look inside the van and see why might somebody omit this washer. Now, before we get to that point, I got to stop and ask you guys for help. If you're getting value from this video, please take a moment to like, subscribe, so you can keep getting more videos like this. We try to really educate people that we work with. We want to help you guys have safer and happier driving out on the road, and do that by educating you. So please like, subscribe, so you don't miss more content like this in the future. With that, let's take a look at the mount inside the coach. All right, we're over on the passenger side of the coach now. We've removed some stuff to get access to our strut mount here. So you'll see there are 4 smaller screws holding that mount onto the sheet metal from below. And then we've got the actual top of the shaft of the strut itself with the nut there. So looking at this from above, you can see why it's simplest to just remove this top nut. You can just get your impact wrench on it, break it loose, and then remove everything from everything that way without having to remove that mount from the strut and then reinstall it off the coach. That being said, it does bring a potential issue with this washer. So you'll notice we've got our floor mat here, all of this stuff here. What can happen is you take that nut loose, you remove the strut, that washer can slide its way down, end up underneath the floor mat there. And then when you go to install your new one, you'll see there is a metal sleeve in the middle of this mount. To the untrained eye, it may look like that's the way it's supposed to go, forgetting that that top washer is omitted. Be aware, both of those washers are required. Major issues can happen if they're omitted. Now, I will also say that if you are experiencing some noise in this area, that passenger front area around the top of the strut itself, it's not necessarily a problem with the strut itself. Mercedes includes this handy little toolkit, which actually rests on top here. We'll reinstall that after the fact, but you have to remove this toolkit in order to get access to your top strut mount. And sometimes, you get it put back in there, you may get some rattle from some of these tools banging around. So that's one of the first things I would check if you've had your struts replaced and you're just getting some rattle. If that's not the case, then definitely either way, make sure that both of those washers are installed on those struts. Let's recap everything that's required for a correct installation of front struts on your Sprinter. So we've got our top nut here that mounts the shaft of the strut. Within the mount, make sure this top washer is included. Again, like I said, if this washer slides its way on down under your floor mat, this is what you'll see. So to the untrained eye, that can look like the correct thing for this nut to tighten down on. It is a metal sleeve, but again, that can allow this whole thing to pull apart. This rubber strut mount really requires these washers on either side, on the top and on the bottom, to safely capture it. It allows some movement to isolate road shock and vibration from the chassis, but safely keeps that captured within the mount. So if you found this video helpful, please stick around next time for our next Tech Tip Tuesday. We're going to continue to provide helpful technical information like this for you, the coach owner, not just for Sprinter owners, but all manner of motorhomes, as well as some other vehicle types in there as well will be mixed in. So until next time, we want to wish you safer and happier driving. Thank you.
Tech Time Tuesday.